Thank you everyone for joining us today for our webinar in the series by the Community Engagement Initiative. This distance learning module is part of a larger series that we began with a presentation by Cajon Valley Union School District and Anaheim Union High School District on May the 6th, followed by a presentation by Oxnard School District on June the 8th. If you would like more information about resources available in these webinars, please check out the CCE's website. As well, following the presentation on June 17th, Azusa will have an office hour for you to come and learn a little bit more about Azusa. So thank you for joining us today on behalf of Community Engagement Initiative. Next slide, please. And so a little bit about our presentation. The Community Engagement Initiative is one of the lead agencies in the California system of support. It is a partnership between the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence, San Bernardino County Superintendent of Schools, California Association for Bilingual Education, and Families in School. As well, our year one cohort schools that participated with us this past year are Anaheim Union High School, Azusa Unified School District, Cajon Valley Union School District, Eastside Union High School District, Ontario Montclair School District, and Oxnard School District. Today you'll be hearing information from Azusa Unified School District. And so our presenters for today is Arturo Ortega, the Interim Deputy Superintendent, Angelica Juarez, the Director of Communications and Community Engagement, Jennifer Edick Bryant, Director of Metrics and LCAP, and Norma Camacho, the Director of English Language Services and Categorical Programs. So at this time, I will hand it over to Azusa Unified School District and help in our presentation today.
Thank you, Stephen. Hi, everyone. This is Arturo Ortega from Azusa Unified School District. Before we jump in, just want to give you a little bit of context because I know context matters, and just give you a little bit about Azusa. So we are located about 20 miles east of downtown Los Angeles. We have about just a little bit over 7,700 students, and that is PK through 12. So we do include preschool students in that number. We are a declining enrollment district. At one point in time, we were over 12,000 students. Depending on the year, we hover somewhere between 24 to 31% English language learners. And again, depending on the year, we hover in the high 80s in terms of low socioeconomic. We have about 15% of our students are special education students. We have the gamut: 2 comprehensive high schools, 1 alternative, 3 7-12 schools, a K-8 school, a small little bitty school of just preschool and TK, and we do have our regular elementary schools that go from TK to 6th grade, and a lot of them do have preschool programs on their site as well. We are very excited to be here with you today, and I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer.
Hi, how is everybody today? I do, before we get started, want to let my 2 other colleagues introduce themselves briefly. Lika, why don't you go ahead and begin, and then Norma, you can go next.
Hi everyone, my name is Angelica Juarez. I go by Lika. I am the Director of Communications and Community Engagement for the Azusa Unified School District.
Hello everyone, my name is Norma Camacho. I am the Director of English Learner Services and Categorical Programs. Glad to be here with you all today.
Thank you both. I want to go ahead and share our session outcomes with you today. Before we even start, you know, there are no silver bullets. We come to you today still learning, still improving, just as all of you here in your different contexts. And I know some of you may come from, as I check the chat, some come from a county level, some come from school levels, some come from district levels, and we're constantly trying to improve and be better. And this is just an opportunity for us to to share some things that we've done and where we're going, and to collaborate a little bit, and then provide a tool for you to possibly use that will help you as you begin to reflect and improve. And so we really want to first tell you our story and our experiences at virtually engaging stakeholders during this COVID emergency. Hopefully you'll be able to walk away with some ideas for your next steps. And like I said, have a tool with which you can do that if you so desire, as you're beginning to help continue to make decisions in your district collaboratively with stakeholders. And like I said, give you this opportunity to use a tool, Flashback, Flash Forward, which is kind of our theme today as we go through this session. So those are the outcomes we're hoping for. How do we intend to get there? Well, our agenda shows us that. You can see for people who love to check off lists, you can check off the first thing, our welcome and introductions. We will do a flashback and tell you the story with Azusa and what we've done in the past with engaging stakeholders in decision making. And then tell you what we did during the COVID-19 emergency. And hopefully then tell you where we're planning to go as we come out of this spring session, and where you can hear from us and some of the things we're doing, and hopefully trigger some thoughts about what you might want to do and ways that you can engage your stakeholders virtually or even in person as it comes to the coming school year. So we're going to go ahead and start with our flashback. And while we do have a short time and you may have some questions, please feel free to type them in the chat box, and my colleagues will be responding as we can. And then I also want to encourage you to attend our office hours on Wednesday to kind of work a little more in depth and maybe get some questions answered. In addition to answering questions at this office hours, we'll be willing to walk with you with the tool that we'll share today and kind of start that process if you'd like an opportunity to do that. And all of our resources will be shared through this webinar, through links, and through the CCE website. So I want to tell you a little bit of the story of Azusa and our stakeholder engagement around decision making. And of course, the big shift came with the onset of LCFF and the LCAP, the local control and accountability plans that all districts had to do. And that statute called for stakeholder engagement and consultation around the goals and the budgeting and the metrics for districts. And so like a lot of districts, we started way back in the very first LCAP, taking the show on the road, engaging in all-comer type meetings where we were gathering feedback and sharing what the LCAP even was, and hearing from parents as we went from school site to school site. We separately consulted with our staff, our teachers, our classified staff, our administrators. And as we got going on that LCAP process, which is the big decision-making process for so many districts, we realized that it could be improved. And one of the things we decided as we developed our first PAC, which was Parent Advisory Committee, a lot of districts developed this. Our PAC was made up of parents from representatives of low-income students, of students in foster youth, and our English learners. But we were meeting separately with our other stakeholders. And so one of the first changes took place in developing what we call our PAC Plus. And that is bringing everybody together, all the voices, the teachers, the classified staff, the administrators, and the parents to sit together and dialogue and begin to really be on the same page together versus at separate meetings. And so that was the birth of PAC Plus in Azusa Unified School District. And after that first iteration of the PAC Plus, we collected feedback, and many of our parents felt like while they wanted to contribute, they were still feeling very hesitant to do so. They felt like they weren't professional educators as our staff were. And so we wanted to tip that kind of imbalance in their hesitancy to really engage in the two-way dialogue. And so the next step in improving our PAC Plus was to increase the number of parent representatives. And so we successfully were able to kind of shift that balance and help our parents feel more comfortable engaging and dialoguing, sharing their views and opinions. And And today our PAC Plus is made up of one parent representative from every one of our school sites. We have 2 parents representing English learners, 2 parents from students in migrant education, 2 parents representing students with disabilities, 2 parents representing students from socioeconomic disadvantaged homes, 2 certificated employees, 2 classified employees, 2 administrators, and then myself as the meeting facilitator. And so that growth really helped change and shift the balance and encourage a lot more two-way dialogue. And there really are 3 things that drive our success with our PAC Plus. As you can see on this slide, transparency, really through the resources we share, we provide details to our stakeholders so that they feel trust and fully informed on everything that's going on with our LCAP, with our expenditures, and even beyond the LCAP. A second success driver is collaborative practices. We use intentional building of relationships, things that allow us within our PAC Plus and within our groups to build positive working relationships. And we use specific structures to do this so that when things get difficult, we have these positive relationships to fall back on to help us navigate through the difficult conversations and decisions that we have to make. And I'll share, one of the things we've been facing, as Arturo mentioned, is declining enrollment. And with that comes declining funding, and making decisions about things that we're going to keep and things we're going to let go of is very difficult. And we do this in collaboration with our stakeholders through the PAC Plus, and those are difficult conversations. And so having collaborative practices is very critical to the positive outcomes that we get from those meetings. And then our third driver is empowerment of our stakeholders and agency building in them, building the capacity for them to understand the statute and LCFF deeply, which then leads to recommendations and ideas that are very much able to be implemented. And then building agency in them as collaborators and as a team and a community of practice together, helping make decisions. And so this has been the evolution of our PAC Plus and where we were today prior to COVID closures. Just as a side, we also have an LCAP Student Advisory Committee where we engage our students, and then we engage all stakeholders through an annual district survey where we get input from all of our parents and all of our staff, and then students again as well, so that they are feeling heard. So I'm telling you a little bit about, in particular, how we're engaging our parents and families, because that is such a critical group to hear from, our end users. And you're hearing it from me, but I want to share this slide with you so that you can really hear the voices of our families, not only in giving you a moment to read these quotes from the data that we collect after all of our meetings, but I also want to have you listen to a recording of what some of our parents have said about the PAC Plus and our process of engaging stakeholders.
That our board has taken us into consideration, us being parents, students, teachers, administrators, staff. I know that they have taken our voice into consideration when making decisions.
The combined efforts of employees and of parents, just everybody throwing out their ideas, figuring out solutions to different problems that the district's going through. And I think, who better than have everyone involved who is involved.
My experience on the PAC Plus have been one of a roller coaster ride, not coming in, not knowing how the district spends the money or how is it distributed to different school sites. Coming in with what do you call a negative thought of that you had the higher ups kind of making all the decisions of how the money is spent, and then coming in and halfway through realizing as a parent you have a voice, and that voice is heard, and that you can make a difference in your kids' life and maybe the school's life.
So we are really proud of the work and the evolution of our PAC Plus. It is still evolving. As I said at the beginning, we don't have it perfectly right yet. It's always a matter of improving and growing. But that as we flash back, we can learn from a lot of the things we've done. And of course, COVID-19 hit and really presented new challenges for us, but also a lot of new learnings, which has been exciting. Tell you a little bit about what we did with our COVID-19 experience. We went ahead and continued holding our PAC Plus meetings. We actually held 2 virtual meetings with our PAC Plus during the pandemic. One of the normal processes for us is to share twice a year ongoing detailed updates on the implementation of our current LCAP. And so we were able to do that at our first meeting. And this came about 2 to 3 weeks into the school closures. One of the things we had to do is offer a lot of technology support to our PAC Plus members. And for example, we said, hey, the day before, if you just want to try logging in, I'm going to be on, jump on and try it out. And so giving that extra support became something really important. We also, in addition to covering the LCAP and where we were and implementing, this provided a great opportunity to hear the experiences of some of our parents with the physical closures of our schools. Of course, we had to navigate making sure that language wasn't a barrier to our parents. And so we'd had in-person translation and began to experiment a little bit with Spanish captions. And we're a Google district, and so we're still learning about how we might be able to leverage Google's ability to translate so that we can communicate. And again, that language isn't posing a barrier for our community to be engaged in 2-way dialogue and helping make decisions for us. This was a great opportunity at our first meeting to get informal feedback on how things were going in our community as well. And so we then held a second meeting, and you can see a photo there. This is some of our participants who wanted to be photographed, and you can see us, most of us smiling, so that's a good thing. And so at this second meeting, we really focused on our COVID-19 operations written report. You know, this is a report that all districts are required to turn in as the LCAP has been postponed. This document must be presented and approved by your board and submitted to your county office of education. And so we wanted to really engage our parents in seeing the draft and contributing to it to ensure that as we are sharing all of the things that took place during the COVID-19 emergency, that this was their perception and they were in agreement. And this provided them an opportunity. I shared the draft with them and they were able to give feedback to some changes and improvements to it. And they provided great resources for ways to disseminate it now that we weren't in school where, you know, we could hand it out or post it in an office. So this was the focus of their second meeting. And then we also tried to improve technologically. Myself as a facilitator, still learning. I felt like by the second meeting I had learned a lot, and so had the parents. And so that was kind of exciting because they saw that and have begun to really appreciate even some of the positive aspects of virtual meetings. These meetings were just about an hour in length. Normally our PAC Plus meetings are all-day meetings. We do meet 5 times a year and dig deeply, but of course, virtual meetings all day would pretty much burn anybody out. So we had to make some changes with our timing as well. As I said, some of the structures we used for these, we are a Google district and we want to stay kind of focused in that platform. Our students were using it and we knew that they could also help parents if they needed help. And so we used Google Meets, and taught everybody how to do grid view. Took some time to really intentionally talk about, and I use the word etiquette, but more as just about that idea of, hey, don't forget to mute yourself and then unmute yourself and some of the things that we have to adapt to a virtual setting. As mentioned earlier, we really do use collaborative practices as part of our process to make sure that our conversations and the difficult conversations in particular are positive and have positive outcomes. And so we took time to go over our working agreements. Working agreements are simply those group norms, arrangements, whatever the different terminology people call it. But this is something that in the photo you see on this slide, this is developed by our PAC Plus every year. And we agreed that this is how we're going to conduct ourselves. And this is a working document. So even in the virtual setting, we took time to attune to the working agreements and make sure that we were all aligned to how we wanted to conduct ourselves. And so we didn't let go of those success drivers, even in the virtual settings. We're, like I said, still working on the Spanish captions. Notice that with a screen share, you know, as a webinar like this, you often just look at the slides, but with a meeting where you want two-way dialogue, it was really important, I found, to kind of stop sharing and have that opportunity for me to really look at people and have almost like a face-to-face as much as possible. And then because of the limited time, one of the things we did was with all of our stakeholder engagement meetings, including PAC Plus, was send ahead a lot of documents so people could review the time that we normally take during the meeting to review and read and discuss documents. They were sent ahead. So those are some of the structures of our PAC Plus meeting. And as I mentioned, we also had other stakeholder engagement meetings where decisions were made and input was gathered. And so we want to share a little bit about some of those as well. And one of them was our Dlac. I'm going to give Norma a couple minutes to share a little bit about that experience and some of the things that went on with our Dlac meeting.
So quickly, just to reiterate, one piece that was really important for conducting our Dlac meeting was to have documents prepared well in advance. We provided them to our Dlac reps about 10 days in advance. So if there were some issue with email or anything like that, we were able to deliver those or put them in the mail so that families had ample time to review minutes. What we were focusing on for this particular Dlac was adding any addendum piece to our comprehensive needs assessment after the experience with distance learning and the school closure due to COVID-19. So we added an addendum piece, and we did require voting to happen. So we had to separate our voting into two separate groups. So families who were participating virtually in the meeting conducted their vote, and then we had took an oral vote with families who were participating over the phone. We found that it was very successful. We were able to connect with all of our Dlac reps prior to the meeting to ensure, one, that they knew how to get onto the meeting, and my staff and myself walked them through that process before the meeting happened, about 2 to 3 days before. And for those families who still had some trouble, who were on phone and were on smartphone, we were able to do some live in time help with them getting onto the virtual meeting. So it was successful. And also the text to speech helped our secretary with taking some notes, and we also recorded the meeting to ensure that the minutes were collected accurately.
Great. Thank you so much, Norma. In addition to Dlac, we have a superintendent's roundtable. And so our superintendent held a couple of roundtable meetings where parents were invited to hear and share a little bit about what was going on during the COVID-19 emergency. And our schools also continued to have a lot of the parent outreaches, a coffee with the principal. We have a high school that has a Cafe Azteca. And what was really interesting about a lot of these school outreach to parents in the community was that the participation, even though it was virtual, through Google Meets, the participation in these shot way up. Normally, Azusa High School for Cafe Azteca has maybe about 20 parents who come to the meetings in person. And during the time that we shifted to these virtual meetings, we saw those numbers go up, into the 60s and even higher. And so it's really interesting for us to reflect on that and look at what can we take away, because of course having more parents involved is what we all want to do as we're working, whether in person or virtually, with our parents, families, and community. And so that was also really an exciting thing that we saw. And it was interesting because I know with PAC Plus, I did not see an increase. I had a few, some of my participants not there. And so I did not see an increase. And so being able to reflect and figure out what the differences were will be kind of our next step as we continue to maybe do some more things virtually. And all of these opportunities really helped us also communicate to families and also collect information from them on their experiences and how we can best meet their needs. We also did an end of the year survey, a special survey to really talk about and focus in on experiences during the school closures. Survey was for our parents, for our students, and teachers and staff, and wanting to see what their readiness was for returning to school, what their biggest concerns were. The biggest one, and as probably not surprisingly, was that our parents as well as our students and staff are concerned about their health and exposure, and yet many of our students and our parents actually confirmed this in their responses. They missed the socialization. The students often said, when they said, what did I like about distance learning? And they said, I loved when my teacher would meet with me individually on Google Meet, or I could talk to friends on the Google Meet. Yeah. And so we know that the social and emotional wellness of our kids and the socialization that's part of that is critical. And we're hearing that in the data we're getting back from these surveys. And it's helping us as we plan for the fall. Whatever the fall will look like, we need to understand how ready our parents and students are, and our staff. We need to understand what their fears are and what worked well about our current distance learning so that we can develop something effective for fall. We also developed what our district calls the Reopening School Imagination Team. And this was an amazing team of 29 parents, students, and staff members who came together to really formulate a framework for how Azusa Unified School District is going to reopen schools. And it's this idea of reimagining and taking a positive kind of stance on what we can do and how we can use this feedback and this data and all of what we learned to develop a structure. And again, like I said, a framework for how best to reopen our schools and what our fall will look like, whether we're fully open or not. And so we have a document, a framework that is available now that came out of this month-long work of this collaborative stakeholder team and making decisions for what was critical in, I believe it's 5 different areas. And so that actually goes to our board tomorrow night. It will not be in our resources right now, but we are happy to share that document with you on Wednesday after our board has officially seen it. And it's not the document itself that it may be useful for you, but I think the process, the idea of bringing diverse stakeholders together, including our families and our community in making these decisions, is the critical piece. And that's part of, again, how we're making sure we're engaging families in decision-making in our community. So what are our successes? What are our challenges? Successes, we were very happy with our willingness of our families, our parents, to learn, to jump on to even if it's their child's Chromebook that was checked out to them, to learn all about the technology. They were so appreciative of our willingness to work with them, and likewise, we're so appreciative of them and their willingness to take time to help us make decisions. It gave us critical information that will help us serve our students better. And as I said, in many of our school-based forums, we saw this increased participation that is wonderful. We still face challenges though. Technology learnings. Our parents even said, hey, could you do technology trainings for parents next fall? And so, that's something that we are absolutely considering. How do we increase participation in some of these smaller groups that are making decisions for LCAP and school reopening and things like that? How do we shift our timeframes? If we're not meeting all day, how do we maintain our true application of our success drivers to dig deeply? How do we do that knowing that we're not going to be able to sit for 5 hours on a webinar and a web meeting? And so we're still going to have to look at how to still meet our outcomes, but in a different time frame. And ensuring equity, always looking to see, do we have every voice at the table? And that is something that we have been focusing on and continue to focus and try to improve and grow in our district. And ensuring compliance, as Norma mentioned, making sure we have documentation, we're taking the official votes and things like that. And then some of our parents mentioned that what they missed most about physical schools was this hub of relationships, this engagement hub where they built friendships with other parents, and they were able to find out information informally as they took their kids to and from school or came to and from events. And so how do we create this connectedness to our schools with our parents and our families if we're still virtual? And so that's also something that's really on our challenge list as we go into fall.
Jennifer, I'm sorry to interrupt. You have a few questions about how the 29 people were chosen for the group.
Okay, and I think one of my colleagues can respond to that. I don't know if Arturo Ortega is still on because he facilitated that group.
Yep. So the 29 persons for the parents, we threw out an email blast to Dlac, PAC Plus, Superintendent's Roundtable, like every parent group that we had. And we said, these are the spots that we have open. If you are interested, please let us know. So that's how we did the parents. For the students, we reached out directly to the principals and said, can you please find some student representatives that are willing to come and speak to their ideas and their suggestions and be able to give input. So that's how we did the students. They gave us the names of those students. And then for the staff, we just thought about, this group was actually broken up into 5 kind of mini groups, if you will. And so as we thought about those groups being operations was one group, safety and health, another group, instruction, another group, student wellness and well-being was another group. And then our last group was family and community engagement. So as we thought about those particular groups, we looked to the staff that would be able to provide the most input, and then that's how we chose the staff.
Okay, thank you so much. So where do we go? What's our flash forward? Flashing forward as we look at where we were before COVID-19, what happened during COVID-19, and then where we're going. We know that parents appreciated some of these virtual opportunities. We saw that particularly with our school sites. And so how can we leverage that to continue to have parents engaged and involved? And maybe that means creating hybrid meetings, thinking about a PAC Plus where if a parent can't attend physically, that they could join virtually at the same time and provide those options, or having virtual meetings as well as, for example, if you have coffee with the principal, how can you have a virtual as well as an in-person meeting? I know as we look at expanding engagement, having perhaps in addition to PAC Plus, which is the real deep decision-making consulting group for our LCAP, having a couple of all-comer hybrid or virtual meetings where more stakeholders that may not be on the PAC Plus that year can come and listen and get some input on what's been happening, as well as provide additional feedback. And again, just providing more opportunities for people to hear, learn, and contribute, and maybe doing that virtually now in a more permanent way, even if we're back to full physical schools and things are back to what we used to call normal. And then really important, as I mentioned earlier, is this idea of how are we going to continue to build capacity in parents to have and use the technology if we're going to go this way. They have expressed their openness and willingness to learn, and how are we as a district going to create those opportunities for them to learn how to use and access the technology if they so desire for a lot of these virtual connections that we're making. And so those are just 4 of the things that we've been thinking about now. The process of reflecting and growing is ongoing, as you know. And so these are just a few things as we flash forward that we are looking at. One of the things that it takes is a kind of a systematic approach to flashing back and flashing forwards. And we just walked you through Azusa's flashback and flash forward process and some of our outcomes. And so I want to share with you a tool that can help you do the same if it's something you'd like to do. You might begin, if you downloaded this, you might have been jotting down some things on it, but this is something that was developed specifically for the purpose of looking at our community engagement and decision making. In all transparency, it was adapted from a process used in PLCs with teachers as they look at learning, student learning, power standards, and then what teaching is going to come next. And so this can be adapted. It was shared as a Word document. I think it was shared as a Word document. So you can adapt it as you see fit to meet your needs and your context. If you're a parent in a school, you can take this and share it with your fellow parents and do the exercise together, or share it with your principal as a tool that you can use as a group. If you're a site leader, a teacher, or principal, or even district or county level, you can adjust some of these prompts as you need. And so let me just walk you through it briefly and how it works. The first step is that flashback. And the prompt in the case of what we're focused on, which is our community engagement and decision making, the prompt is how have you engaged your community in decision making in the past? And then how are you satisfied with your outcomes? And ideally, what you would want to do is have everyone in a group complete this individually first. Again, people coming from different perspectives and contexts, you want them to really share that individual reflection, and then share out whole group. And if it's an in-person meeting, it would be something that would be charted, but virtually you can also, through shared Google Docs, be able to show everybody's responses to the flashback. The next point, the next column really is to take some time to look at what happened during COVID-19. And for some, it was a lot, and some it was, when it comes to community engagement, decision making, we had to stop. We were all hands on deck to get through distance learning. And there's really no judgment. It's just what happened, and are you satisfied with the outcome? And again, by giving people individualized time to think and jot down their responses, and then to share in a whole group and to chart all of those responses, you're getting multiple perspectives. And that's really important if you're working with a group that includes parents and teachers or staff members at different levels and different positions. Going on, then you move to your flash forward column, where you want to come up with some ideas of what do you want to integrate now from your learning, or what would you like to start in your district or school around engaging the community in decision making, and what are the outcomes you hope to see from this. Really begin to think about, if you do something, what are the results you're looking for? And again, this idea of having everybody first kind of jot down their individual thoughts allows everyone's voice to be heard, but also as you bring those together, you'll be able to see common themes emerge, common ideas. And that will also allow you to kind of help prioritize, because we know we can't all do everything all at once. And if there is a whole list of really great ideas in your flash forward column, the next step is, okay, where do we start? And by seeing where everyone brings their common ideas and seeing the most prevalent ones, you'll be able to identify, well, maybe this one everybody mentioned, do parent trainings on technology. Hey, maybe that's where we start. Let's start by thinking through and planning something for that. And so the flash forward is really where you're going, and focusing on outcomes will also help you develop ways in which you want to measure how successful you are with reaching those outcomes. So again, as I said, this is a document that is really meant to be useful to you and be adapted and used for your context. I put in the prompts based on the flashback and flash forward we were doing here with you today. But you can feel free to make it fit whatever you wanted to look at or examine, whether it is community engagement and decision-making or something else related to community engagement at different levels, the school, the district level, and so on. So this is a tool. And as we get to our office hours, in addition to maybe responding to some of your questions, if you'd like to start the process and we could work collaboratively, kind of walking through this in more detail, we're happy to do that with you. Because as we all learn, and we can sit down and we'll learn from you just as easily as you can learn from us. And as we know, out of collaboration comes great things, better than when we do things on our own. And so we're true believers of that in Azusa, and want to make sure that not only are we contributing, but we're also being able to hear and learn from your experiences as well. So if you want to join us at office hours, we're happy to do that with you. So as we come towards the end of our presentation, I want to just let you know what we have, and we'll do some question and answer here shortly. But we do have some resources for you. As I mentioned, we have the flashback, flash forward template. I did put a sample of our working agreements for this year from our PAC Plus. As I said, the working agreements are not something that I take and use every year. These agreements are developed by the PAC Plus. We take time to work together through a structured process to come up with how we want to act, be, and work together over the course of the year. Our working agreements are living documents. They can be changed, and at every meeting we check in on them, and we do intentional consensus that yes, we're still good with them, or we open up conversation around, is there something we need to adjust? And the data that I collect after every meeting from the participants also helps guide whether we need to address any issues that might be interfering with the functioning of the group as a collaborative community. So the sample is for you as just kind of an idea, but obviously not something that I would recommend plopping into your context because it may or may not fit. I also thought we would share with you our end of the year surveys. We participated with our parent survey through LCAP, who was collecting information as well on parents' readiness. And so as a joint collaborative effort, we put a survey together. We were able to add a question of our own that was really Azusa Unified based, because we're beginning to think about the idea of a permanent online or virtual school and what that would look like, and our parents and our students interested in such a thing. So that survey then also includes our teacher survey and our student survey. Students grades 4 through 12 took that survey, and again, trying to hear their voices, hear what their experiences were during COVID-19, and then let that data drive some decisions that we're making. Also, I mentioned that one of the things the PAC Plus did was to consult on our COVID-19 operations written report. And I do have a small picture there for you of our report, but I can't share it with you yet. As you know, it has to go to our board, and I probably wouldn't be in a good position if I shared it with a bunch of people before I shared it with my board. So I am going to hold off on sharing that actual document with you, but I will do that after the 23rd of June, which is its scheduled day to be on the agenda. And of course, it'll be available on our website. We have our contact information there and our Azusa website available as well if later on you want to reach out with any questions. And as I said, we have our office hours as well. But I do want to take the remainder of the time and allow, because we have about 10 minutes for some question and answer time, or if you need any clarification on some of the things that we shared today, provide some time for us to kind of dialogue around that. So if you want to ask a question, you can go ahead and I think, Lika, have we been able to respond to all questions in the chat, or? I don't know. Oh.
There's one question about, and I'm not sure if this is for Azusa or if this is for Stephen or the broader audience on this group, but it's from Sturgis. It says, how are we incorporating the national conversation on racial equity into the COVID discussions and decisions? So I can only obviously speak about Azusa. So most of our parent interactions when we're talking about the reopening school imagination team, when we're talking about the PAC Plus, when we're talking about superintendent's roundtable, when we're talking about those kinds of groups, a huge majority of that happened prior to what is happening right now currently. So not very limited in that sense. As a district, we did put out to the community a written reaction, if you will, about what is happening. In Azusa, we did have, I believe it was 2 very peaceful, very positive protests in our city. We did have very close and surrounding cities who did the same as well. But again, for the most part, very peaceful. And so we did put out something in the community in English and Spanish about what we are doing in Azusa Unified School District in terms of equity, in terms of access, in terms of acceptance and embracing. And so that's the extent of where we are right now. Moving forward with COVID-19, this is a big conversation, especially if we're not going to be allowed to come back 100%. We are having conversations about if we have to do some kind of staggered or some kind of small group, which students, whether that's because of academics, whether that's because of access, whether that's because of resources, whatever that may be, we are thinking beyond the grade level or beyond the content, and also pushing ourselves to say, maybe it's not about a schedule, maybe it's not about a content, but maybe it's about student groups, and those groups are the ones that we focus on first. So much is unknown right now currently, but those are kind of some of the things that we are doing in Azusa in response to that. So thank you.
Yeah. I saw that there was another question regarding our translation services and during virtual meetings. We had live translation at the PAC Plus, and then through Google Meets and through the Google platform, there is a way to do your settings where you can select a language that Google will then translate for you. And so we set up, for example, I might set up Spanish and English as my 2 languages. And then when you turn on the captions in Google Meets, you can indicate that you want the language to come in Spanish. So for example, if I'm speaking English and one of my parents wants to have it translated into Spanish, they can have what I'm saying in English be translated into Spanish in the captions, and then vice versa, because I want them to be able to communicate to me. And if I am not fluent in Spanish, I can have Google will translate the Spanish spoken into English in my captions, so we can make sure we're clearly communicating. It is through Google Translate, and so it is an area that we're still exploring. I still have, for my meetings that I facilitated, of course, still had a person who could translate, to make sure there wasn't any lost communication. I think the question also included, did we see an increase in our non-English speaking parents? And I can go back to that example of the Cafe Azteca, where that school actually has 2 different meetings, and one is in English and then one is in Spanish, and both of those saw increases in parent participation. And so that is something that is really hopeful for us, as well as we encourage our families to come regardless of what language they're most comfortable with. And we make it a point in Azusa to always have some sort of translation available, have documents in multiple languages, so that even our COVID-19 operations written report, there is a Spanish translation of it, so that all families can access what happened and hear about all of the different areas that we were required to address based on the governor's executive order. So that's something that we do in our district as an ongoing practice to meet the needs of our families who choose to communicate in a different language. And the question also about the 29 people in the group, the parents were separated into different groups. So Arturo or Norman, you can talk about, Norma, you can talk about how the parents weren't all in one of the groups. I think they were part of all groups.
No, it actually was a self-selection. So we wanted to make sure that people were in groups that were calling their passion or their interest. And so we kind of fought the urge to say, okay, well, there's going to be a parent in each one, there's going to be a student in each one, there's going to be a staff member in each one. So we kind of fought that urge and said, let people go like where their purpose is calling them to be. And we let it go in that direction. So there were some groups that did not have parents because they did not select that one. I think it was only one though. I think that was around the student social emotional, which by the way is where most students chose to be in. And so we felt that it would work better if people were where they had something to say and something to share.
Thank you. Thanks. Last question as we close out. You must have missed, about our meetings. Yes, we did have 5 meetings this year. We ended up, we did aim to do that. And we did our PAC Plus. The question was around our PAC Plus. And one of the things that we have done is extended the number of meetings and the length of the meetings so that we can build the deep understanding and deep dialogue and decision making. And so we were able to put our final 2 meetings were virtual. Of course, we didn't have an LCAP. Normally this would have been the PAC Plus working on developing and collaborating and consulting on our development of our LCAP. But as that was shifted to December as a due date, we shifted that to having them provide input on our COVID-19 operations written report. So we were still able to do that. Of course, as I said, the time we didn't do all day because of the pure virtual aspect of the meetings. And so as we enter fall, we'll really have to look at what we can and can't do with meetings and how we can leverage both in-person if possible, as well as virtual to begin to pick right up. In fact, my PAC Plus, the last thing they said as we signed off at our meeting last week was, when's our next meeting? And that's so exciting because it's the end of the school year and it means they're already looking ahead. And so we're excited to, with them, develop what we're going to need to do to jump into the new year together. So just want to say thank you to everybody for joining us today. We hope that this was helpful, brought you some ideas and sparked maybe some conversation in your different contexts. Again, we know this has been a hard time for everybody. We're still learning and we love sharing what we learned and where we're hoping to go. And please feel free to join us at our office hours where we can talk in more detail. And again, maybe even start the process of working through the tool with you. Just wishing you all a wonderful rest of your day and thank you again. Stephen, I'm not sure if you wanted to do a final sign off.
Yes, and so thank you Azusa team for sharing all the great work you're doing. Thank you for everyone for joining us on this call today. The Community Engagement Initiative appreciates being able to share some of the promising practices of our school district. As we move forward, we hope to provide more webinar opportunities in the fall. So please take a moment to complete the survey and share things that you like or topics you would like to learn more about from our cohort 1 participants. As well, you'll see in the chat box links to the office hours. So if you want to spend more time and learn more about Azusa, please join them on June the 17th at 1 p.m. The registration link is in the box. Outside of that, thank everyone. We thank you all for joining us. Gracias para todos a venir a conocer un poco más sobre el Distrito Escolar de Azusa. Y si tienes algunas preguntas, dudas, or inquietudes, you can look in the PowerPoint and reach out to Azusa. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us.